All right, we are ready to begin our next lesson. Today's learning goal is that students will be able to add fractions with different denominators. We already know how to add fractions that have the same denominators, and luckily, having different denominators only requires one extra step. So we'll go through that real quick. Um, First of all, adding fractions it's not that much different from adding fractions with different denominators. So the important step, this is the extra step, is that you have to make sure that the fractions have the same denominator before you can add them. So let's go through the steps. The first step is that we're going to find the least common denominator for both fractions. We learned that in yesterday's lesson, um, and you do that by finding the least common multiple of the denominators and make that your fraction. And then you're going to find the equivalent fraction for each of the fractions. Sometimes you'll have to change one, sometimes you'll have to change both, depending on what that least common denominator is. Once you find those equivalent fractions and they have the same denominator, then you just add the numerators and keep the denominators, just like you do when you add fractions when they have the same denominator. And then the last step, we simplify if we need to. If our answer is an improper fraction, we turn it into a mixed number. If we can simplify the fraction part of our answer, then we do that simplifying also. Once you've done that, then you finish the problem. So let's go ahead and do some sample problems. The first sample problem that we're going to do is 2/3 plus 1/4. Okay, so you see we have our notes set up. We have our learning goal and our heading up here at the top. And we have our first problem written down. Notice that when we write these problems down, we write them one on top of the other. This makes it easier for us to convert to our equivalent fractions. So when I see your work, I want to see you putting the fractions, no matter how the problem is written. When they give it to you, I want to see them written as one on top of the other. So the first step that we talked about, the first step is to find a common denominator. So we have 3 and we have 4. In order to do that, we take the multiples of 4 and see if 3 will go into it. So the first multiple of 4 is 4. And we say, does 3 go into 4 evenly? No, it doesn't. So then we find the next multiple. 4 times 2 is 8. Does 3 go into 8 evenly? No, it doesn't. So we have to go to the next multiple. 4 times 3 is 12. Does 3 go into 12? Yes, it does. And so we're going to make 12 our denominator. And so we're going to write that down for both of them over here to the side. Then we ask ourselves, 4 times what number is going to equal 12? Well, we know that 4 times 3 equals 12. And we know that if we multiply on the bottom, we have to multiply on the top because we want the fraction to have the same value. And so 1 times 3 is 3. So 1/4 and 3/12 have the same value. We do the same thing with the fraction on the top. 3 times what gives you 12? Well, we know 3 times 4 gives us 12. If we do it on the bottom, we have to do it on the top. And then we multiply 2 times 4, and that gives us 8. So now we have our equivalent fractions, 8/12 and 3/12, and we just add them like we normally would. So 8 plus 3 is 11. We keep the denominator. And then the last step is to simplify if possible. And we look, can 11 and 12 be simplified? No, that's as small as it's going to get. And so our answer is 11/12. All right, so let's do our second sample problem. Our second sample problem is 1/4 plus 5/6. So again, when we write the problem down, we write the fractions one on top of the other, regardless of how they come to us. The first step is to find the least common denominator. We do that by looking at the bigger of the two numbers and find the multiples. And so we do start with the first multiple of 6, which is 6. Does 4 go into 6 evenly? No, it doesn't. So we do the next multiple of 6. 6 times 2 is 12. Does 4 go into 12? Yes, it does. We know that 4 times 3 is 12. So our least common denominator is going to be 12. Now we want to find the second step, which is our equivalent fractions. So we start here. 6 times what value gives us 12? Well, we know that that's 2. Well, if we do times 2 on the bottom, we have to do times 2 on the top to keep it equal. 5 times 2 is 10. And so 10 twelfths has the same value as 5/6. We need to do the same thing with the top fraction, 1/4. We know that 4 times 3 is equal to 12. 1 times 3 is equal to 3. And so 3/12 is the equivalent fraction of 1/4. Now that we have equivalent fractions and they have the same denominator, we just add like we normally would. 3 plus 10 is 13. We keep the denominator, which is 12. The last step is to simplify. We see that we have an improper fraction. We know that when we have an improper fraction, we have to turn it into a mixed number. So how do we do that? This is similar. We learned this when we did division, and we need to interpret the remainder, and we knew that the remainder was going to be part of the whole. And you need to always remember that fractions are really just a different way of writing a division problem. And so for our division problem, we're going to have 13 divided by 12. 12 goes into 13 one time. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 1 is 1. We subtract. 3 minus 2 is 1. 1 minus 1 is 0. And there's nothing to bring down. So we can write this. We have 1 with a remainder of 1. But we also know that we can write this as 1 and then 1/12. Where do we get those numbers from? Well, the number here in your answer is going to be the whole number part. The number here that's the remainder is going to be the numerator. And the number on the bottom of the fraction is going to be the denominator. And we get that from the divisor in our division problem. So we get a 1 from here, we get a 1 from the numerator, and then the denominator comes from the divisor. And so 13/12 is the same thing, has the same value as 1 and 1/12. And so this is our final answer. We can't simplify 1/12. That's as simple as it's going to get. And so our final answer is 1 and 1/12. And our last sample problem is going to be 3/4 plus 3/5. Again, we write it one on top of the other. We have to find a common denominator. That's our first step. Take the larger the number. Does 4 go into 5? No, it doesn't. Take the next multiple. 5 times 2 is 10. Does 4 go into 10? No, it doesn't. Do the next multiple. 5 times 3 is 15. Does 4 go into 15? No, it doesn't. Do the next multiple. 5 times 4 is 20. Does 4 go into 20? Yes, it does. And so 20 is going to be our common denominator. So we go ahead and write that down for both of our fractions. The next thing we do is find the equivalent fraction. 5 times what is going to give you 20? Well, we know 5 times 4 does. If we do times 4 on the bottom, we have to do times 4 on the top. 3 times 4 is 12. Do the next problem. 4 times what gives you 20? Well, we know that's times 5. Times 5 on the bottom means times 5 on the top. and 3 times 5 is 15. Now we add like we would normally add. 15 or 5 plus 2 is 7. 1 plus 1 is 2, and we keep the denominator, so it's 27 over 2. Again, we have an improper fraction. With an improper fraction, we need to convert that to a mixed number. So we're going to do our division problem. So we have the 27 in the inside. We have the 20 on the outside. How many times does 20 go into 27? One time. 1 times 0 is 0. 1 times 2 is 2. Subtract. 7 minus 0 is 7. 2 minus 2 is 0. So we're left, and again, we know we have 1 is our answer. That's going to be our whole number. The remainder is going to be the numerator, so we put the 7 up here. And then the divisor in our division problem is going to be the denominator. And then we look, can we simplify 7/20ths? No, we can't simplify 7/20ths. And so that is our answer, 1 and 7/20ths. Okay, so just like our last lesson, we're going to be doing our practice problems on Moodle. So go ahead and go back to Moodle and do the practice problems assignments that are associated with today's lesson on adding fractions with different denominators. We'll be reviewing this when we come into class, and so have a great evening.